The suit fit me perfectly, thanks to old Milo Finch, who'd been dressing me since I was a young teacher, freshly hired at the Beaverton Bay Research Center. Saturday, June 7th. I looked at my reflection in the mirror and tried to smile. Wrinkles gathered at my eyes like cracked clay at the bottom of a dried pond. 72, and I could still stand straight. Military training and years of diving taught me to keep my back firm and my eyes on the threat. Even a threat like this. I took the envelope I'd received 2 weeks earlier from my breast pocket. The doctor's report. Aggressive pancreatic cancer. 6 months, maybe 8, if luck held. Oddly, I felt neither fear nor despair. Only a quiet, nearly peaceful sadness, as if I were sitting on the shore watching the last sunset of a long-awaited vacation. I folded the paper carefully and slipped it back into the envelope. No one needed to know, at least not today. Not at Ethan's wedding. Ethan, my grandson, the only one in the family who truly inherited my fascination for the sea and its secrets. I remembered the first time I took him to the station. He was 8 then, a mop of red hair and freckles dusted across his nose. He wouldn't leave the microscopes, peering at the plankton we'd gathered that morning. "Grandpa Art, it's a whole world," he whispered without looking up. "They're tiny but complicated, like a clock. Only alive." In that moment I saw myself in him, the same hunger to understand, the same wonder at how intricate everything is. Unlike my son Martin, who always thought my life's work as a marine biologist was dull and pointless. The ping of a message pulled me back. The phone sat on the bedside table. "Grandpa, are you ready? Mom's asking if she should pick you." A V for Clara. Even in her text she used a single letter, as if her full name cost too much effort. Clara Bennett, soon to be Clara Hayes, daughter of Gregory Bennett, owner of Bennett Farmer. Beautiful, educated, flawless, from the lacquered nails to the perfectly set hair, and cold. The kind of cold I knew from deep currents I'd studied my whole life. "I'm on my way." "I'll get there myself, thank you," I typed, polite by habit. In a few hours she would be family. Family. I almost smiled at the word. Since Elizabeth died 7 years ago, the idea had turned hazy. Martin and his wife Laura never hid that they considered me a burden. "Dad, you should move into assisted living. They'll take care of you." I'd heard it so many times I could mouth it along. Only the money from my patent, a method for detecting toxins in marine organisms, which I used to cover their mortgage and Ethan's schooling, kept them from taking more decisive steps. I locked the door of my house on Lake Beaverton and walked to the car. The morning was clear. The sun sat high over the water, turning it to a sheet of light. I loved this place. Elizabeth and I spent our best years here. We planned to grow old here together. At the wheel of my old Volvo, I remembered when Ethan told me he was engaged. He'd burst in unannounced, glowing. "Grandpa," she said yes. I hugged him, proud and strangely uneasy. They'd met in grad school, both in marine biochemistry. Love at first sight, he'd said. But something about the girl tugged at me. Maybe the way her eyes skimmed my modest home when she and Ethan came for dinner, or how she cut me off whenever I spoke about my research, bored, as if it didn't matter. "Are you sure she's the one?" I asked as evenly as I could. "Absolutely, Grandpa. She's brilliant, ambitious. We share the same interests. And her father can help fund our deep-sea farm research." And there it was. Pharmaceutical potential. Money. Always money. I parked near St. James Church, red brick dressed in white ribbons and flowers. Guests gathered. Most faces new to me, likely Clara's circle. Gregory Bennett stood apart. Tall, posture perfect, eyes like ice that cooled the room. Beside him, Diana, a painfully thin woman with a fixed smile and eyes that didn't join in. "Arthur!" Laura's voice came too bright, too eager. She hurried over, adjusting a hairstyle too young for her. "We were starting to worry. Ethan was asking about you." "I'm right on time, Laura," I said, checking my watch. "An hour remained before the ceremony." "Yes, of course. But the photographer wants family shots before we start. Everyone's waiting." She reached for my sleeve. Martin wrapped up a conversation and turned to me. "Dad," he nodded. "You look good." "New suit?" "No, I just haven't worn it in a while," I said. "Bought it for Elizabeth's funeral." He should have remembered, but his memory was always selective. Clara entered, radiant in her dress. She drifted through compliments like they were her due. In a passing quip about success, she laughed. "My father says, behind every great man there's a strong family or an influential father-in-law." I stayed quiet. Ethan had earned his own standing. The fact that I'd paid for his education was simply the opening he used well. Finally, Ethan appeared, my red-haired boy, now 28 in a tuxedo, fussing with his tie. "Grandpa." He hugged me, and for an instant I saw the 8-year-old at the microscope again. "I'm so glad you're here. None of this would have happened without you. If only he knew how literal that was." 2 months earlier, Martin had come with a small request. The Bennetts wanted a grand wedding, and Martin's finances couldn't match their standards. I agreed to cover a large share, almost 40%, from my savings. Not for Martin or Clara, but for Ethan's happiness. "This is your day, Ethan. You deserve the best." The photos dragged. Laura bossed everyone around, placing me at the edge. Easy to crop out later. "Mr. Hayes, perhaps you should sit," Diana Bennett murmured with practiced concern. "At your age, standing so long is tiring." "At my age, Mrs. Bennett, I can still stand on a research deck through a storm." I smiled. "I'll survive a camera." When the photographer finally called a break, I slipped to the garden behind the church to breathe. The headache that had hovered for days pressed harder. Diagnosis, stress, it all blended. I sat beneath an old oak and closed my eyes. I remembered Dr. Robert Klein calling me in after my annual check. "Arthur, some results are off. I want an MRI and additional panels." I'd known then. In 40 years of friendship, I knew his voice when the news was bad. A week later, pancreatic cancer, stage 4, liver mets. Treatment could buy time, not save it. How long? 6 months? Maybe a bit more with chemo. I decided not to tell the family until after the wedding. Why darken Ethan's day? He deserved unshadowed joy. "There you are," Laura's voice cut in. "We're about to start. You need to take your place." Her face carried that pinched irritation, as if my existence complicated her schedule. "I'm coming," I said, rising slowly. She softened almost. "Maybe you shouldn't stay through the whole reception. You look tired, and the young ones, they'll want to dance." "Don't worry," I said. "I know when to leave." If only she knew how literally I meant it. The church filled. I sat in the front row beside Martin, who kept glancing at his phone. When the music rose and Clara walked on Gregory's arm, I saw Ethan's face glow with such clear happiness it ached in my chest. He loved her. I prayed I was wrong about what I'd seen in her. The ceremony was beautiful. Afterward, the guests flowed to the Beaverton Grand Hotel for the reception. On the drive, another wave of pain hit. I pulled over, took a pill, and waited it out. The ballroom was splendor. White orchids, crystal, silk drape, wealth announcing itself from every corner. My modest contribution dissolved in the flood. I took my seat at the family table, feeling more and more outside the scene. Clara's cousin tried small talk, then gave up, deciding, I suppose, that the old man wasn't worth the effort. Through the evening, I watched Clara with the staff. Each time a server approached, she wore that thin hauteur. Once she even snapped her fingers to summon a waiter, as if calling a trained animal. Ethan didn't seem to see it, busy in conversation with an elderly professor. Maybe he didn't notice. Maybe he chose not to. When dessert landed, I decided I needed a word alone with Ethan. As he moved toward the bar, I rose, hiding the limp that came when the pain climbed. "Ethan," I said gently. "Got a minute?" He brightened. "Of course, Grandpa. Isn't this place something?" Gregory insisted on it. "Clara and I would have picked something smaller. It's a fine evening," I said. "But I wanted to ask about Clara." His smile tightened. "What about her?" "She treats the staff." I kept my voice even. "It worries me," he sighed. "Grandpa, it's wedding stress. She's not like that in the lab. She's brilliant. Intuition like you wouldn't believe. We're making real progress together." He wasn't ready to hear it. Love in the day had blinded him. "I believe you," I said. "I want your happiness. Just remember, marriage is a partnership. Shared values matter as much as shared work." Relief touched his eyes. "Thanks, Grandpa. You always know what to say." Clara appeared, slipped an arm through his. "Honey, Dad's looking for you. Something urgent about our research." She flicked a glance at me. "Sorry, Mr. Hayes. Go." I nodded. He left with a guilty look. I stepped out to the terrace for air and another pill. The night over Beaverton twinkled, and for a moment I asked the stars what Elizabeth would have told me to do. She'd have known how to speak so Ethan could hear without being hurt. After the ceremony, guests poured into the banquet hall for the reception. My seat was far to the side of the family table, beside one of Clara's distant cousins, who didn't try to speak twice. Across the room, Gregory Bennet stood like a general surveying his troops. His wife, Diana, smiled that thin, rehearsed smile at everyone who approached, as if her face had forgotten how to rest. Plates clattered. Champagne poured, laughter filled the air, but it all sounded distant, muffled like I was underwater. The painkillers dulled more than my body. They softened the world. Then came the speeches. Gregory rose first, glass lifted. "When my daughter brought Ethan home," he said, "I admit I was skeptical, a young scientist with no connections, no fortune." A polite chuckle rippled through the hall. But I was wrong. His brilliance and dedication speak for themselves. Their partnership has already brought promising results for our company. He caught himself, smiled, and of course for the scientific community. Applause followed, loud and hollow. I noticed Ethan blush faintly. Productive future, Gregory had said. Not loving, not happy, productive, as though this was a merger, not a marriage. Dinner arrived in glittering waves, scallops, lamb tiny desserts shaped like art. I barely touched mine. The pain in my gut pressed harder now, so I excused myself. Pretending to search for the restroom, I passed a side room with the door slightly open and stopped when I heard voices. It was Clara and her mother. "I don't see why he has to sit at the main table," Clara hissed. "He looks like he's about to die right there. He's ruining the photos." "Darling," Diana replied smoothly, "he's your husband's grandfather. People would notice if he vanished. Strange or not, he's a burden," Clara said coldly. "A pathetic burden. And believe me, he won't be part of our lives. Once we're back from the honeymoon, we'll move him to Sunny Harbor. Martin's nearly got him to sign the papers already. Out of sight, out of mind. For a moment I couldn't breathe. The blood in my ears thundered. "Keep your voice down," Diana whispered. "The walls have ears," Clara laughed quietly. "He probably can't hear a thing. And if he can, well, given his health, we might not need to wait long anyway." They both laughed then, lightly, as if discussing the weather. Something inside me cracked. Not anger, not shock, but a deep final disappointment. So I turned away and kept walking toward the restroom, steadying myself against the wall. My reflection in the mirror stared back pale, hollow-eyed, older than I'd ever felt. That was the moment I decided Ethan deserved the truth. About my illness. About his wife. About everything. When I returned, the host was announcing open toasts. Guests lined up near the microphone, co-workers, friends, a few relatives. I waited until the last one finished and stepped forward. The hall went quiet. Clara stiffened, her painted smile tightening. Ethan, unaware, grinned. "Grandpa's making a speech." I leaned on the stand, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Arthur Hayes. I'm the groom's grandfather." A few polite nods. "I'm not much for speeches, but there are things a man shouldn't leave unsaid." I turned to Ethan. "You've been curious since the day you could walk. You brought home injured birds, watched the tides, asked questions that even I couldn't answer. I always knew you'd grow into an extraordinary man. I'm proud of you for your work, for your kindness, for your heart," he smiled, eyes shining. "I also won't hide," I continued, "that I've helped where I could, paid for your studies, supported your research, even contributed a large part of this wedding's cost. I did it with joy. But I'd be lying if I said my heart is peaceful tonight." A faint murmur rolled through the guests. I felt Martin tense beside me, saw Gregory's expression harden. 2 weeks ago," I said, "I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors gave me 6 months." Gasps spread across the hall. Ethan stood suddenly, pale, eyes wide. I raised a hand. "Let me finish. I wasn't going to say anything tonight. I didn't want to cloud your happiness. But a few minutes ago, I overheard something that changed my mind." My eyes moved to Clara, who'd gone rigid. "Your new wife," I said quietly, called me a pathetic burden. She told her mother I'd be gone soon enough, and that after the honeymoon they'd see me off to sunny harbour. A wave of shocked whispers swept the room. Clara shot to her feet, trembling with fury. "That's a lie," she shouted. "He's making it up." I didn't stop. "I also learned," I said, voice steady, "that this plan involved my son and his wife." I glanced at Martin and Laura, who sat frozen, eyes down. Then I pulled an envelope from my jacket and placed it on the table in front of Ethan. "Inside is everything I own. My house, my savings. They're yours, Ethan, yours alone. I want you to make your own choices, not ones shaped by greed or influence." The room was silent, except for the faint buzz of lights overhead. "I love you, my boy," I said softly. "Always will." "But you needed the truth." I stepped back from the mic. The silence cracked into chaos. Clara's face twisted. She grabbed the table edge, knuckles white. "How dare you?" she cried. "This is our day." Her words broke off. Her eyes rolled and she collapsed. Gregory lunged forward to catch her. Shouting filled the hall. Someone calling for a doctor, chairs scraping, the panic of scandal. I turned away. Ethan half moved toward me, half toward her, frozen between love and disbelief. I walked out under the crystal lights, through the doorway, into the night air. The sirens echoed behind me by the time I reached my car. I sat there a long while before starting the engine. My hands were steady. Inside me there was no triumph, only a strange, weightless quiet. My part was done. What came next was no longer mine to shape. The night after the wedding, my house greeted me with silence and the faint scent of the lake drifting through the open window. I took off the suit, folded it neatly over the chair, and sank into my armchair by the window. The pain throbbed beneath my ribs, steady but tolerable. Outside, the water reflected a thin moon, silver ripples stretching to the horizon. I thought of Elizabeth, my wife. I could almost hear her voice again, soft and sure. "Arthur, truth can wound, but it saves the soul." She'd always believed that. I had too. I must have dozed off because the pounding on the door startled me awake. I shuffled to answer, still in yesterday's shirt. Martin stood there, face red with anger. "Are you happy now?" he spat, pushing his way inside. "You ruined everything." Clara fainted in front of 200 people. The Bennetts are threatening lawsuits. Ethan's devastated. I didn't argue. I filled a glass of water, took a slow sip and waited. "Don't you have anything to say?" He barked. I told the truth, I said quietly. "The truth?" He laughed bitterly. "You humiliated our family. They're saying you've lost your mind, that you made up that whole story because of your illness." I turned toward him. "Would you rather I had stayed silent and let my grandson live under a lie?" He rubbed his temples. "You're dying, Dad. Couldn't you spend what little time you have left in peace instead of dragging us all through hell?" I met his eyes. "Peace without truth is just waiting for death." He fell silent for a moment. Then softer, "Ethan doesn't know what to think. He's torn between you and her. She's in the hospital on an IV, and Gregory Bennett's already talking about defamation." "I expected that," I said. "Expected it?" Martin snapped. "They're powerful, Dad. They have lawyers, connections, money. You think they'll let this go?" "Let them do what they must," I said, turning back toward the window. "I've faced storms before," he sighed heavily. "I've arranged help for you, whether you like it or not. You can't stay here alone." "I already have help," I replied. "Dr. Margaret Cole will be staying with me. She knows my condition." He frowned. "Your old colleague? You're dragging her into this now?" "She offered," I said simply. "And she's the one person left who understands what matters." Martin shook his head, the anger fading into exhaustion. "You've always been stubborn. Mum was the only one who could ever reach you." He started for the door, then paused. "Ethan's coming to see you tomorrow. Don't push him away, Dad. Please." After he left, I stood at the window for a long time, listening to the waves slap gently against the dock. The house felt colder, emptier, but for the first time in years my conscience felt light. The next morning came grey and quiet. Around noon the phone rang. A man's voice introduced himself as Lawrence Blackwell, the Bennett's attorney. "Mr. Hayes, my clients are willing to avoid a public lawsuit," he began smoothly. If you sign a statement acknowledging that you misheard the conversation due to your medical condition and issue a written apology to Mrs. Bennett, they will withdraw all legal action. In return, Bennett Pharma will cover all your medical expenses in full. I let him finish, then asked, "You're offering to buy my silence?" "Not at all," he said. "We're offering a way for everyone to save face." "I'm not interested in saving face," I replied. "Only the truth." "Mr. Hayes," he continued, his tone sharpening, "you have no proof. No recording, no witnesses. It's your word against theirs. Do you really wish to spend your remaining time entangled in court?" "My time is mine," I said, and hung up. For the first time since the diagnosis, I felt something close to peace. The bridges were burning behind me, but at least I was standing on solid ground. That evening, a car pulled up in the driveway. Through the window I saw Ethan step out, shoulders tense, hair uncombed, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. Martin followed him to the door but stayed on the porch as Ethan came inside alone. He stood for a moment, just looking at me. "Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" he asked quietly. "I didn't want to ruin your wedding," I said. "You could have told me after." "I meant to," I admitted. "But then I heard what your wife said." Ethan's jaw tightened. "She says she never said that. She says you made it up because you never liked her." "I heard her clearly," I replied. "Every word." He stared down at his hands. "She's in the hospital, Grandpa. They said the stress might have caused a miscarriage." I felt a sting in my chest. Despite everything, I hadn't wished her harm. "I'm sorry she's suffering," I said, "but I won't lie to ease anyone's guilt." He looked up, his eyes rimmed red. "Her father's going to ruin you, Grandpa. He said he'll spend every dollar to do it." "I've been poor before," I said gently, "but I've never been dishonest. That's a debt I won't owe." Ethan's shoulders slumped. "You're asking me to choose between you and her." "No," I said softly. "I'm asking you to choose the truth when you find it." For a moment he didn't speak. Then he stood, voice trembling. "I can't do this right now." He turned for the door. "Ethan," I said, and he stopped. "Whatever happens, remember I'm always on your side." He nodded once without looking back and left. I listened to the sound of the car driving away until it vanished down the road. The silence that followed felt endless. That night, the pain returned worse than before, sharp enough to blur my vision. I swallowed a pill and sat by the lake. The water shimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment it felt like Elizabeth was sitting beside me again. "You'd tell me I did right, wouldn't you?" I murmured. In my head I heard her answer, "Truth always costs something, Arthur. But lies cost everything." I closed my eyes and let the night carry her voice away across the water. Dr. Margaret Cole arrived 2 days later, suitcase in one hand, a grocery bag in the other. I hadn't seen her in years, yet her energy was the same. Sharp eyes, quick smile, and a voice that cut through silence like sunlight through fog. "Well, you look terrible," she said cheerfully the moment I opened the door. I laughed for the first time in days. That's the warm welcome I remember. She stepped inside, placed the groceries on the counter, and scanned the room.
"Still neat as a lab bench."
"You really are impossible. It's the habit of order," I said. "Once you spend decades cataloguing plankton samples, you start organizing your life the same way." Margaret's expression softened. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "Physically, I'm managing. Emotionally, well, my family's at war with itself. My son's ashamed, my grandson's torn, and the Bennetts are circling like sharks." She took my hand. "You did what you had to. Ethan will see that in time." We talked for hours that night, about the lawsuit, about my treatments, about life in the lab. For a while, the years peeled away, and we were back on the Beaverton docks, arguing about marine toxins over instant coffee. Days blurred into weeks. Chemotherapy began. A grey, numbing rhythm of hospital visits, nausea, and long silences. The Bennett's lawsuit arrived by courier. 15 pages of accusations, defamation, emotional distress, reputational damage. I hired Alan Pierce, an old friend and attorney, with a calm, deliberate mind. "They're throwing everything at you," he said, scanning the document. "But most of it won't stick. Still, they'll drag this out to make you fold." "I won't," I said. "Even if it kills me sooner," he sighed. "You're a stubborn man, Arthur Hayes. I was a scientist for 40 years, I replied. I've built my life on stubborn truths. The pain worsened, but Margaret's presence softened the edges. She cooked simple meals, kept the place alive with music, and never let me sink too deep into the quiet. Some evenings we'd sit on the porch overlooking the lake, watching the last light fade over the water. "Do you ever think you'll forgive them?" she asked one night. I looked out at the shimmering reflection of the moon. Forgiveness isn't the issue. Understanding is. They live in a world where worth is measured in wealth and reputation. I live in one where worth is measured in truth. She smiled faintly. That's why I stayed your friend, you know. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, I said softly. It's just necessary. Weeks later, another offer arrived from Lawrence Blackwell. This time it was even more calculated. If I signed a non-disclosure agreement and agreed not to contact Ethan or Clara, the Bennetts would drop the lawsuit entirely. They want to buy my silence and my distance, I said after reading it. They're desperate, Margaret said. They're afraid of what might come out in court. Then we'll go to court, I replied. She nodded. Good, let's make them regret underestimating a dying man. Summer faded into early autumn. The mornings grew cooler. The lake wrapped in mist until mid-morning. My body weakened, but strangely my mind grew sharper, like the illness had stripped away everything unnecessary. I spent hours writing, notes for Ethan, my research journals, letters to old colleagues Ethan hadn't called. Each day that passed without his voice carved a little deeper into the silence of the house, until one late afternoon, when I heard a car pull into the drive. Margaret peeked through the curtain. It's him. My heart stumbled in my chest. I set my pen down, smoothed my shirt, and opened the door. Ethan stood there, thinner, his eyes hollow with regret. Grandpa, he said softly, can I come in? Of course, Ethan, this will always be your home. He stepped inside slowly, as though the house itself carried memories he wasn't ready to face. Margaret gave me a brief, knowing look, then slipped out to the garden, leaving us alone. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he whispered, I owe you an apology. You owe me nothing, I said. You were lied to. No, he said, shaking his head. I was blind. I wanted to believe in her so badly that I ignored everything you warned me about. He drew a shaky breath. After the wedding, I tried to make it work. I told myself you were wrong, that you misheard. But then, he stopped. Then what? I asked quietly. I found documents she'd been hiding, contracts she'd been negotiating to transfer our research funding into her father's company, behind my back. When I confronted her, she didn't even deny it. She said marriage was a business arrangement, that I was naive to think otherwise. I felt the air leave my lungs. And what did you do? I packed my things, he said simply. I filed for divorce last week. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the slow ticking of the old wall clock. I'm sorry you had to learn the truth that way, I said finally. I'm sorry I didn't listen, he said. Then his voice cracked. I was so afraid you'd die before I could tell you that. I reached out and rested my hand on his shoulder. I'm not gone yet, and I'm proud of you. Not for leaving her, but for finding your courage. He looked at me, tears burning in his eyes. She and her father are furious. They're threatening to destroy my career. I don't care anymore. I just wanted to see you. I smiled faintly. You have my stubbornness, Ethan. That's both a curse and a gift. He laughed weakly, wiping at his face. The doctors say your condition's stabilized a bit. For now, I said. Every day is a borrowed day. But it's enough, Margaret returned then, carrying tea. She smiled at Ethan, her warmth filling the room. He smiled back politely, then turned to me. What will happen with the lawsuit? We'll fight it, I said. If I'm not here when it ends, Margaret will finish what I started. Ethan hesitated. Grandpa, I don't need the house or your money. Keep them. I shook my head. They're yours. Use them to start over. Use them for something honest. I reached for the envelope that had sat on my desk since the wedding, the same one I'd placed before him that night. You never opened this. He took it, opened it slowly. Inside were the property deeds and my remaining savings account information. His eyes widened. Grandpa, this is enough to keep your work alive, I said. I want you to pursue your research without compromise. No corporations, no influence. Just truth. He nodded, voice trembling. I promise, I smiled. That's all I ever wanted. We sat together for hours after that, talking about the sea, about Elizabeth, about the way light bends underwater. For the first time in months, laughter filled the house again. When he finally stood to leave, he hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. I'll come back soon, he said. I'll be here, I answered. Always. He looked back once before driving away, and in that look I saw forgiveness, his and mine bound together. That night, the air over the lake was still. The moon hung low, a pale coin above the water. I sat on the porch with Margaret, both of us wrapped in blankets. You did it, she said quietly. I didn't do anything, I said. Truth did, she smiled, turning her eyes to the reflection on the lake. Then let's drink to that. We raised our cups of tea to the darkness, and for a moment I could swear I felt Elizabeth smiling somewhere among the stars. We talked for hours about his new work, his plans to found an independent research institute, one free from corporate hands. I'm calling it Hayes Marine Institute, he said shyly. I smiled faintly. Then my work's not ending, it's just changing hands. He stayed until the light faded. When he left, I watched him through the window, walking down the snowy path. His figure grew smaller and smaller until the world turned still again. That night I dreamed of water. The lake stretched endlessly beneath a starlit sky. I stood on the old Aquila, the deck swaying gently. Elizabeth waited at the bow, her smile bright as moonlight, ready to come home. She asked. I nodded. The dream faded into light. When morning came, Margaret found me sitting peacefully by the window, the sunrise spilling gold across my face. The letter to Ethan lay open beside my hand. She didn't cry right away. She just stood there watching the light shift, then whispered, You did it, Arthur. Months later, Ethan read that letter aloud at my memorial service by the lake. The crowd was small, colleagues, students, a few neighbors. If you're reading this, I've gone back to the sea that raised me. Don't mourn too long. The world always needs people who will tell the truth, even when it costs them everything. That's the legacy I leave you. Honor it, and you'll never walk in darkness. When he finished, the lake was silent except for the soft splash of waves against the dock. Then he took a small vial of seawater from his pocket and poured it into the lake. For you, Grandpa, he said. For the truth. The wind caught the ripples and carried them outward, merging them with the wider water, quiet, endless, alive, and somewhere in that vast reflection the tide rolled back, whispering the only answer that ever mattered. Truth endures.